Hello, everybody. It's Thursday, February 20th, and in just a little bit, Felix and I will be talking to some friends from France to talk about what's going on in that country. But before we get to that, let's talk about what's going on in our own nation. I think just a quick hit on Trump. The one thing I saw him do this week is saying, quote, "We're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there." Now, Felix, I bring this up because, recently we've been talking about some of the key differences between Trump 1 and 2. And I think that 4-year gap in between his presidency, I think the Fort Knox thing is more indicative of how his senility has advanced over the last 4 years. And I think he's even more vulnerable to just the last thing someone told him.
Yeah. This is also, I just did Ryan Broderick's podcast, sort of pursuant to Searching for a Friend, because he's also a big conservative media watcher. And it turned into a really interesting, very intensive, wide-ranging conversation on the modern conservative media environment. And he said something that I thought was really interesting about Trump too. And it's that all of the stuff like this, where it's we're going to go to Fort Knox to see if there's gold there still, is it could be consequent to that period where he was banned from everywhere. And so he had to go to GroiperNet to post. And it totally divorced him from any connection to the liberal world. And maybe that would have happened anyway, partly because all the guide rails are gone, but there is no Jared and Ivanka there this time to go what even is this? Because I pride myself on knowing all this stuff. I had never heard of the Fort Knox thing before. It sounds like such a 90s thing, like a Beau Grits thing.
There's a British secret agent. His name's Bond, James Bond. People are saying that he's one of the greatest British agents. I think he's actually one of the worst. And we expect him to die. Many people are expecting it more and more these days, but we expect he'll be dead very shortly, and it'll be very nice once we get our gold back from Fort Knox.
It's just such a mercantile problem. It's I think honestly, what would change if there was no gold there? Our currency
gold doesn't have any more intrinsic value than a fucking dollar bill. It's just something we decided.
It would be embarrassing because it's the gold place, but we've had a lot of embarrassing things happen here.
Before moving on, I guess on the geopolitical front, I should mention basically the seismic changes that are going to bring the end of the Ukraine war. And look, you can't but not feel bad for Ukraine because that country is about to get eviscerated by both Russia and the United States.
Oh no, yeah.
But I gotta say, the true victory was never really attempted. They did not fully unleash the NATO meme battalion as well as they could have, and I think Putin would have been defeated had our feckless Western leaders decided to really fund them more than they already are. I would have liked
sort of a Charlie Wilson's War type thing, where an American Groiper teaches the various Danes and Lithuanians and NATO the ways of groiping online. I think that would have been fantastic.
I mean, I think Ukraine is probably we need to do an episode dedicated to that. Probably.
I have a pretty intensive interview planned about. I mean, it was planned well before this, but sort of about the NGO system there. And this obviously probably just tacked about an hour onto that episode that's going to be recorded in March. Yeah, no, I mean, in 2022, there were a lot of people saying that, this is a distinct and some would say guaranteed possibility. Guaranteed possibility? Fucking idiot. Guaranteed outcome.
There are guaranteed possibilities and unknown possibilities and unknown guaranteed possibilities.
That's what I call a guaranteed possibility.
You got Biden brain.
Yeah,
you're going to let the joke come out again.
100% can tell you that it might happen. Near guaranteed outcome for non-favorite client states without an Israel type lobby, or, a pre-existing special relationship. The Trump proposal where they're on the hook for effectively like 3 times their GDP, I don't really know if that literally will be attempted, because it just kind of flies in the face of like the physical realities of like resource extraction. And I think even if you could like literally yank out $500 billion worth of minerals from Ukraine in a cost-effective way in like a year, it would be like sort of a Spanish siglo de oro thing where it fucks up the rare metal prices, whatever those are. But I do think there is absolutely like probably something monstrous in store for them on his end.
I mean, yeah, like it's hard to feel any worse for them than like what's already happened to that country. But I mean, when I think about the like, God knows how many lives just wasted in this atrocious fucking war, it sort of blinkers the imagination. And obviously, the responsibility with this government for creating this outcome is, pretty sickening to think about. But that being said, like this war is should come to an end, and like I can't imagine a different scenario that like could have avoided this, other than like not gassing up Ukraine to the extent that this country did to create a proxy war,
or like negotiating a settlement when things were far more in their favor, or really anything but what we did. I mean, like really demanding any type of money or anything from them after all of this is probably earns us a few 9/11s done by Ukrainians.
Oh my God. It's going to be 9/11 every day. I mean, nothing like funding an army of battle-hardened psychopaths and then betraying them to engender the security of air travel in, I don't know, Europe or America in the coming years.
Yeah.
History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
I didn't even mean in the sense that like, oh, we're going to get a definite 9/11 that will happen, though. With all of the fucking immense amount of weapons and the incredibly pissed off, hardened veterans that there will be now. I just meant that, like, if they did 9/11 to us a bunch of times, we kind of deserve it after all of this.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's a long line of people doing 9/11 to us who've earned it, but,
Get in line. Like I said, I think we'll need a longer episode about the end of the Ukraine war. But I want to turn to domestic politics because, this last week has seen, I would say that the temperature of the last week has been a lot of federal workers who were veterans finding out that they're getting laid off and being like, I didn't think it would apply to me. And like the ongoing effects of, the Doge's cuts to government. And then an anger among Democratic voters about why the Democratic Party doesn't seem to be functioning and like standing up to any of this. And, like a lot of people will try to defend them to be like, well, actually, Schumer talked about airline safety on the floor of the Senate all the time. But like, it's not crossing over. And it's like, it's not registering in people's minds that the Democrats are like motivated to try to stop these cuts to vital government services and jobs and things like that. But like their coordinated message seems to be like, well, we don't have any branch of government right now, so don't expect anything from us. But I think like the bigger question is for like people's anger and frustration is that they should realize that it's not a matter of like, why aren't they doing anything? I mean, it's a matter of they actually like and enjoy what's happening here, but they don't want to claim responsibility for it. I think they are more than happy to see Doge gut many government services and employment. And
yeah. I mean, like, the lower you put the bar for what the state's capabilities are supposed to be, the lower the bar is when the Democrats are in there with control of Congress.
The perfect avatar for the current moment is, of course, the leader of the Democratic Party, Hakeem Jeffries, who, as far as recording this and planning this show, has fast becoming my favorite politician in America.
Because I love him.
The Captain Chaos thing.
Captain Chaos and the extreme MAGA Republicans spent last year promising to lower the high cost of living and running away from Project 2025 as if it didn't exist.
I didn't think they could come up with a catchphrase more counterproductive or worse than Dangerous Donald, which makes him sound cool. But Captain Chaos sounds like a Saturday morning cartoon show. Captain Chaos.
Yeah.
This is what he's calling Trump now.
Yeah.
And he was like, and he said it like he was so proud. He was like, I'm calling him Captain Chaos.
We said this during I think our first discussion about Jeffries as the leader of resistance to potentially next speaker. It's such a weird choice that he decided to be a politician. It's so fucking weird because he doesn't just seem uncomfortable on a podium. There are politicians who are bad stump speakers, but they're good at retail politics bullshit, or they're good on TV. That's a pretty common type of politician now, someone who's not good at the traditional politician speech, but very good at media as it's consumed now. He has the bearing of not even the CEO of an insurance company who did that, but the assistant counsel for an insurance company that stole data about families that lost more than 2 children. He just always seems sort of ashamed and embarrassed and but also I shouldn't have to talk to anyone about this.
Well, before we get into our interview with about France, I did want to share about Democrats who are speaking and Democrats who have some fresh new ideas. I got to read a little bit from this because nothing made me laugh harder this week than this interview that Ezra Klein did in the New York Times, titled "A Democrat Who Is Thinking Differently." And this is an interview with a congressman from Massachusetts named Jake Auchincloss. Felix, are you familiar with this guy? Auchincloss? Jake Auchincloss.
Yeah, I have always done a triple take when I read his name because it's you see Jake Auchincloss, and it's a very crowded up spelling. And you're wasn't that Hitler's plan to fill the Nile with molten gold, or turn the moon into the last synagogue in the universe,
and that's what the Sound of Music was about. Sound of Music was about Jake Auchincloss.
Yeah, a Plan Auchincloss. It's we're gonna find Hagar the Horrible skeleton. And we're each going to put one bone from his body into the body of everyone from Nazi high command, and then we're all going to impregnate each other's wives. So eventually there'll be one sort of monkeys on typewriters thing. Through all these permutations, we'll make a full Hagar the Horrible again, who is our god that we worship.
We have in our possession the spear of Longinus that pierced the ribs of Christ, and also Hagar the Horrible's helmet.
Yeah, that's what Plan Auchincloss was. It was to get the spear of destiny, the Holy Grail,
Asterix and Obelixes.
Yeah, and then Santa's list. It was two biblical weapons, fucking things from the comic book Preacher, and then but also we need the first mistletoe Mrs. Claus made.
All right. Well, this is, I just like that Ezra introduces this guy, and he says, one Democrat who has interested me is Jake Auchincloss, a congressman from Massachusetts. Among the Democrats talking about the abundance agenda, he has particularly interesting things to say. It's not that I agree with every idea he offers here. I don't. But when I hear him, I hear someone wrestling with a question I pose to other Democrats. What is your alternative? What did people need to hear from you over these last few years that they didn't? Okay, so Auchincloss says here, he says, my view on that is that voters who ordered a Coca-Cola didn't want a Diet Coke. There are two different parties. We have to start by understanding who our voters are not, and then understanding who our voters could be, and then go try and win them over. If you're walking into the polls and your number one issue is guns, immigration, or trans participation in sports, you're probably not going to be a Democratic voter. That's okay. There are two parties. But if you were a voter who went Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump, and you're walking to the polls and your number one issue is cost of living, boy, we'd better win you back. Okay, so starting off, pretty sensible. But he says here, the core Democratic economic message is that taxes plus housing plus healthcare is less than half your wallet. That is our economic telos. And that requires treating cost disease where it affects sectors across the United States economy, most notably housing and healthcare. Okay, Klein has the same question I do. What is cost disease? Auchincloss says, cost disease is the most important economic policy concept that policymakers are unaware of. Sectors like housing and healthcare are afflicted by Baumol's cost disease, which says that because they are very labor intensive and low productivity, they're going to inflate faster than the gross domestic product. Haircuts are a good example of this. Haircuts are non-automatable and service intensive. Yet the wage for a hairstylist has to be competitive with the wage for someone in a sector that has higher productivity gains. So you're going to see more and more share of wallet going towards these sectors. Imagine if you were going to build a car, and instead of buying a car at a dealership, you stood in your driveway, called up a general contractor, and had them subcontract out the various parts to the car. And people came to your driveway and built the car piece by piece. Imagine how much that car would cost. A lot more than a typical car, right? Well, that's how we build houses, and it doesn't actually have to be that way. And in fact, it is tied to the abundance agenda that I know you and Derek Thompson and others have been pushing in front of policy conversations. The abundance agenda makes the case that if you're trying to lower the cost of living for the typical American family, you need to unlock supply rather than subsidize demand. You need to build more stuff. And then he goes on to talking about we need zoning reform to expand supply, but also we lean into off-site construction, turn housing production away from stick-built, where it's highly service intensive, and towards modular construction, where it's more factory intensive. So he basically wants to build modular homes.
So like prefab houses where it's modular. So like you could buy the garden upgrade if you did go to work. Or you could take something away. Like if your wife's being bad, you can take away the second bathroom, and so she'll have less towels to, customize.
I mean, even if there's like a germ of a point there, like I just read that and my brain turned off. Like when he started talking about Bauman's cost disease. It's like, how about we just, I don't know, like make it illegal to charge rent or something.
I mean, we should test this man for Hagar the Horrible's DNA, because the cost disease sounds like someone working for Plan Auchincloss would call a certain ethno-religious identity in Europe.
Imagine you want to build a house.
Germany's afflicted by the cost disease.
Imagine you want to build a house, but the only people available to build it are the Romani people, who are known for their deceitful contracting practices.
Yeah, a cost disease in society. This whole thing, his whole program, I mean, like, it is the way he starts off, where it's like, okay, like if you're into whatever shit on Facebook, you're probably not going to be a part of this. It makes more sense than anything I've heard from like any Democrat that Ezra Klein will talk to in a really long time, I guess. But then the whole like abundance thing, that would work great in a universe where, like, I guess Hillary had a plane accident in 2014. We're like 5% more like the West Wing, and there was this like big Democratic primary in 2016 of young technocrats, and like the national mood is like 20% better. But it's just like seeing it now is so fucking wild to me.
Well, Klein says, your point about modular housing is well taken, which is why I think we need bigger ideas than we have right now. You pointed out in California, and I've seen myself in Massachusetts, that despite the liberalizing land use restrictions, successes that we've had at the state house level, we haven't built that much housing, have we? Auchincloss says, what about a governor-sanctioned charter city in these states? Massachusetts has 2 bases that have been demilitarized, Fort Devens and Union Point, a tremendous amount of land there that is interstitial to local zoning regulations. Why don't we have the big idea of the governor and the state house, either in Massachusetts or in California or another blue state, starting a new city and saying, we're actually going to build 200,000 units of housing there. We're going to ban cars and develop it so it's more organic and walkable. So turning decommissioned military bases into 15-minute cities. I don't know. Maybe this guy's winning me over.
Whatever. I just like my brain turns off this housing stuff. I just like you guys over there, you figure it out. I don't. I've tried to like do that thing on Twitter. I think we all do it, where it's like, you scroll through enough and you end up on the profile of someone who's like far enough outside of your social or lurking circles that it's quite novel to you, and you're interested to see what are the, what are the foundations of their world. I've done it with all types of people. I've done it with like, inner city anime fans. but they're in Canada. Or I've done it with like French fans of FaZe Clan. Or I've done it with, like fans of Jeezy in the country Gabon. And I've tried to do it with housing, and I just get like, I close my eyes and I just see like a red background with white letters. Kill yourself now, kill yourself now, kill yourself now. And I have to stop because I hope you guys figure it out because I cannot pay attention.
All right, well, let's get out of housing here. He also says, I'm also relatively pro-blockchain because I think it can empower creators in a digital economy. Okay. Going on here, he talks about, but what TikTok makes so plain and what you just laid out is no. Let's be very clear here that TikTok and ByteDance report to the CCP, and the CCP has levers of influence as well. So let me just underscore that, not to be a doomer about it, but Trump issued the Trump coin, and that Trump coin is the equivalent of issuing an account number for a Swiss bank account, telling foreign adversaries they can deposit funds into blah, blah, blah. So he's talking about the Chinese and the Saudis bribing Trump. But then he goes on to say, I hosted an app challenge, basically where young middle schoolers and high schoolers can build their own apps. What was striking to me is, even in the last 4 years that I've been doing this, the apps that they were building were about real life community. The winning app created a way for people to sign up online to go out and clean up their environment locally. Gen Z gets it. They understand that this is not good for them, and their parents look at their kids and say, I don't think it's fair that they're growing up and that their adolescence is being warped by the bottom line of these companies. So he created an app create an app to not use apps.
Was he just like railing Adderall during this? Like, what the fuck are you? Can you slow down? He's like taking his shirt off. And another thing, I make all the children in my community rearrange all the books in my house. I throw them out of my fucking window. I make them come in and rearrange them by an order that I've come up with. Sometimes it's alphabetical. Sometimes it's by the race of the author. I don't even know what their fucking races are. They found out that 7% of my books are written by Pacific Islanders. What, Jake? What?
The last bit I want to talk about is where he gets into healthcare. And he says here, I feel like as a party, we need to move away from equating health insurance with healthcare. For the last 15 years, the core thesis of the party has been everybody needs health insurance, pre-existing condition or not. And we're going to subsidize the health insurance companies to make sure that it's universal. We've had a lot of success doing that, and it's critical that everybody does have health insurance in this country, but the focus needs to shift towards cost. We're not going to be able to convince Americans that we're the party to trust on healthcare if we don't have big ideas on how we actually make not Medicare for all, but how about community health centers for all, where everyone can access a doctor and a pharmacist and a diagnostician without having to go through the maze of health insurance. And then he says, because actually I'm a supporter of private health insurance, because neither side can actually say no to the other. You see what you would expect from a lack of competition and choice, inflation. What we need is more granularity in those healthcare negotiations, such that it's not the entire provider system negotiating with an entire payer system, but rather different centers of excellence and specialties that have to negotiate.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. More personnel and fucking rent seekers and remoras. I love Jake Auchincloss, not just because he is Herman Goring did the thing Stannis did to create him. I love him because it's like he'll start out saying something that like, imagine in a better world, this would be like the most right-wing guy in the American AMLO.
He starts out talking sense, but then like he gets a head of steam going and it evaporates into complete drivel.
Yeah, like he'll start out and be like, look, like this situation where like people are beginning their professional lives in like immense amounts of debt. It's terrible. It's crushing. There are like these knock-on effects that are like deleterious to people's social lives and just their bonds in their personal life. It's going into, how people are starting families. And then he'll go, and that's why we have to do something where you can rent a college student for 20 years. And you can earn 30% of what they earn at work. But if they go unemployed, you have to pay for their student loans. What?
I mean,
how did you get there?
His platform is, and I read the whole interview. It's more modular houses and different zoning policies.
The healthcare thing is the most fucking insane thing I've ever heard, because it's like we need more granularity in the healthcare system. No, there's not nearly enough of that. People haggling over and setting the exact price point for what is a 900,000% profit margin on a single aspirin. There's not enough fucking granularity. Well, I put 30 more people that you have to call to go see a doctor.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Like the most like the worst drivel he said is when he starts talking about an attention tax. He says here, we use a phrase that I think hints at what this might look like. When you're scrolling on your phone and when you're looking at content, you are paying attention, right? And if you're paying attention, that they are buying attention. In a real world, that could be subject to sales tax and a value-added tax.
Get respect.
In the digital world, it's monetized and thereby it is not taxable. The degradation of attention and the greed for our attention spans these corporations exhibit suggests that we need to update our tax code to reflect not an industrial economy, but an intention economy. These companies will come back and say, if you try to do a value-added tax, it's going to be unworkable. And here are 55 reasons it's unworkable. Is it going to be challenging to implement that? Yes. But it's also challenging to do capital gains taxes on private equity. Our tax code and tax enforcement update themselves. So, like, how about you just do taxes on capital gains, which is the only thing these people fucking care about?
How is it difficult to do capital gains to private equity? You go, okay, what was the profit here? You're taxing the concept of attention. I love him. He's taking like probably the single, like, just as far as like, you know, maybe not the worst problem in the world, but like what is like the biggest problem for social relations, for how worthwhile and enjoyable people's lives are, how they retain information, and how they actually understand and hold the concept of time and reality in their mind. It is probably modern media consumption, phones. And he gets there and he acknowledges it. And then he's like, we should go into Tron to figure out how to tax them. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. No, Felix, listen to this. I think the core thesis is very well grounded. When you are paying attention and they are buying attention, that has value. And we know it has value because they turn around and bundle it for a price to advertisers. And we simply say, you're paying a VAT tax based on that. And the VAT is not going to go to the general fund. The VAT is going to go to a separate chartered entity that disperses the funds for local journalism. This is just like, just take away their money and break up these corporations. Just nationalize these fucking companies and then tax the people who own them, tax their capital gains. What is this? I mean, like, again, it's the germ of a reasonable idea that like these companies profit off our attention, but like it's then needlessly complicated. But as soon as you start talking about a VAT system for your attention, again, like I read this and my brain just turns off. Look, like I just imagine pitching this to like a voter.
Think about pitching this to like, one of those guys from that article we read with Pendeo Time, where it's like, my wife's been locked in a refrigerator for 3 years, you know? My wife's been locked in a refrigerator and I love Trump, but I think I'm going to kill him.
Yeah.
My car's expensive. What are you going to do? And he's like, he's completely naked, fucking purple from taking Dexies. You know, you put a hat on your head, but you put ideas in your head. What if we made hats and books in the same place? And then if you make more hats than books, you're taking away from things you put in the head to put something on the head. And then every cent that we tax the hats that are more than books, we put that into a fund to go big head mode in real life.
I just want to read the last part of this. And keep in mind that he just said that I'm a supporter of private health insurance.
Sorry, one more thing. He's established, like, I really like bureaucracy to the point that, like, I'm on record the only guy to suggest this. I think there should be a 200,000 person federal bureaucracy specifically to, like, indulge the fantasies of the insane. Just like make a fake program where insane people in America
busy box for lunatics.
Yeah, lunatics go there and they're like, I think I'm being, sex trafficked by Russell Crowe. And like a guy in a suit and tie will be like, okay, let's get this on file. They'll just indulge them and keep them away from the normal world, but not fill them with drugs or torture them. But he is creating so many offices and sub offices and like oversight offices to the sub office to make sure that they're deficit neutral, he will actually need press gangs to staff all of this. We're like, we will get to full employment, and like maybe your kid is going to have to start working for like the local journalism attention fund oversight committee when he turns like 4. There aren't enough people in the world to fill out these positions.
Well, I mean, Felix, the Ukraine war coming to an end. Maybe we could give visas to some of their press gangs to come to this country and round up lames and cripples to work the data mines of his attention tax bureau.
Yeah, I think this might be the new Hitler. I really do.
Citizen, you now live in the charter of zone. Yeah. Welcome to Fort Owens, formerly of Massachusetts.
I really think this is the new Hitler, not in the sense that he's going to do all of that stuff. Maybe. But like in the sense where it's like, I'm reading this and I'm hearing this. We're all hearing this and we're going, what the fuck? Who could be into this? But there's like a certain type of mania that it hits on something that I think it will result
it's a mental illness born of too much education.
Well, I don't think that was Hitler's problem.
About Auchincloss.
Well, I actually just think it's stimulants similar to Hitler.
The Adderall.
But yeah. I think somehow like 70% of people are going to be into this. Just they don't even know what he's saying, but they just like his sort of like mania, like with Hitler. And no, yeah, we're going to have to delete this episode because of how strong he is. That will suck. He's gonna do all the stuff that Trump could never do. He will conquer Canada. He'll do the I forgot the actual word for when the Nazis took over Austria, because all I can think is Auchincloss. I know it wasn't the Auchincloss.
That's the word.
It was what the fuck was that?
Anschluss.
It's so close to Auchincloss.
I just tried to search for it on Wikipedia, and the first entry is Jake Auchincloss. I don't know how to spell it.
This is the new Hitler.
Yep.
He's not going to go after Jews. I don't know who he's going to go after.
He's going to go after kids on their phone. I mean, like, he also wants to ban phones in schools, which, you know what, I'm in favor of too.
Yeah, sure.
He has this attention tax thing, but then he says he's also big into quote, a solution for healthcare is invest in biotechnology. He's not for Medicare for all. And
sewing twins together. See how much salt water a fucking Eastern European can drink.
Sorry, I just want to. The last thing that he closes out here, and just keep in mind what I just said about that he's against Medicare for all and for private insurance. The last question Ezra Klein asked him is, your bio on X says that you want an economy that works like Legos, not Monopoly. What do you mean by that? I think it's working like hungry hippos right now myself. Yeah.
Jake,
grab what you can and run.
Jake, you're one of the most insane people I've ever talked to.
But listen to his
Can you remind me that thing you said when you fucking sprinted through my door because you were on PCP and shut down all the pain receptors in your body? When you left a Jake Auchincloss-sized hole in my garage and held a knife to my wife's throat and said, listen to my new idea on how I'm going to fix envelopes. Why are you licking them? They should come closed. They should already have your letter in
it. Sorry, just for him to explain his toy analogy for the U.S. economy, he says here, he means that too much of our economy has been captured by middlemen and rent seekers, and not enough of it is empowering individuals to build things that matter together. And that's why we need to continue to have private health insurance companies.
This is so Hitler. He's like, we're not, this is all like rents. This is nothing, spinning the wheels. Communism, dead idea. Capitalism has gotten us here. Third way, the only way we're going to get to the moon, put the last synagogue there, find Calvin and Hobbes,
find Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, clone
We're
him.
Gonna go, we need people working together on grand projects. A train that's 50 miles long and can go Mach 3. Going to Jupiter's moons. Going to Jupiter's moon Europa, the ice moon. Going there, drilling to the inside using a drill powered by the minds of children who we have systematically deprived of both technology and reading so they can focus all of their young minds on the motion of this drill. Telekinesis is real. We need to get to the center of Europa. Once we get there, we will find the real existing people from the comic book Foxtrot. They predate humanity by 7 trillion years. Humanity was designed in the concept of Foxtrot. Jason Fox is 700 trillion years old. He predates God. God was invented by the bald dad from Foxtrot. Paige is 400 billion years old. She's the youngest member of the family.
The iguana is there, living under the surface of the ice planet, the ice moon.
Yeah, this is 80% of Americans are going to vote for him. This is so scary.
Well, there you have it. That's the future of the Democratic Party.
This is the future of the world. This is the... If anyone played the Wolfenstein games, this is what it's going to be like.
His invocation of investing in biotechnology is also very unsettling.
It's really scary. Well, I mean,
we won't need cars when we're animals. When we're going to make centaurs real.
If anyone is like going to make like this cyborg suit from Metal Gear Rising, it might be Jake Auchincloss. I don't think this will be so bad, actually.
Well, I mean, I think
this will be fine. We should get on board.
Yeah. All right.
I don't want to be in a camp. I think it's nice too. Look, it really could be worse. He's ambitious.
He made the 15-minute cities run on time. I'll say that for Auchincloss.
Yeah, and he went to that dimension where Family Guy and The Simpsons knew each other. The one that was trapped 8 miles underneath the St. Louis Arch. And that's where the only real Jewish person in the world lives.
Yeah, this is the congressman from Massachusetts and the Denver International Airport. He represents 2 districts, strangely enough.
He was born there. He was born underneath that mural. The scariest guy ever.
All right.
Ezra Klein is going to be killed in a Francis Dollarhide-esque manner by this man.
It's going to be a hell of a PowerPoint presentation. All right. Well, that's enough about this rotten country. Let's talk about another rotten country, France. So listeners to the show will know that occasionally we cast our gaze beyond the borders of our own fair country, America, and begin to meddle in the internal affairs of other countries. Over the last year or so, we've done a number of episodes about England. We did an episode about Germany. But now it is time to turn our attention to the other great European country. Sorry, Spain and Italy. We'll be talking about France today. And joining us to teach us a little bit about what's going on in French politics at the moment, our guests of the day, Marlon Ettinger and Olly Haynes of the Flep24 podcast. That stands for French Legislative Elections Podcast. So, Marlon, Olly, I'll just begin here. How did 2 nice boys like you end up in France covering French elections?
Well, I got to correct you now. It's Flep 24/7 because it's no longer 2024. And we were going to try to do them every day, but every time I say that, we stop doing them every day. But I ended up in France because I have French family and I live here now. Olly is faking it. He's not actually coming from France, are you?
You've outed me. My girlfriend's French, so I sort of live between France and the UK because Macron, with his, evil fascist immigration policy, is not letting me become one of them.
But here's the real answer. It's Jean-Luc Melanchon. I know we're going to get into him later and we're going to start somewhere else, but I just learned about Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the left-wing politician, in 2017. And that sort of propelled me to come to France, get better at French, and learn more about him, and then end up reporting on all this stuff.
Well, my next question, actually, Olly, I think you'd be a good person to answer this. I love France. I love the French people, but I fear that they don't like me. Olly, what is your advice? Is there any way I can get French people to like me short of perfectly learning to speak their language?
No.
Oh, God damn it.
I still go through the experience of my French is pretty good, although I speak it with an accent. And they're still interrupting me, trying to speak like broken English at me. Even though I'm speaking perfectly, they're insisting that no, I must be an idiot. And I'm sure that's like Marlon probably has this. It's probably 10 times worse for Americans.
We went on like a family trip to France when I was a kid, and my mom spoke like a little French, but she would, I don't know, try this. This might work for you. This is at a different time, but things have changed a lot. She would run out of French words, and then she would sort of speak English to them in sort of like a Count Chocula type accent, it's described as. And with no one murdered us or stole from us, or did taken to us in the entire time we were there. So I think that's they respect that more.
Okay, yeah, well,
I think they do. That's sort of my speaking Spanish method. I just like speak French in a Spanish accent and try to get there.
Well, I would love for the show to do I would love for us to go to Paris to do a show there, but it is illegal to speak English in public, and I don't want to run afoul of the gendarmes. But Marlon, let's begin. Like it's been like a lot going on in French politics over the last 8 months or so, like elections, and I'm trying to figure out like what's all went down. But I think we should begin with a scandal that has gotten no burn here in the United States, but has embroiled the current French prime minister in the classic scandal, Catholic school child sex abuse. Could you begin there? And could you explain what this scandal is and how it's affecting the current French government?
Yeah, it's a classic French headline. 3 men yesterday were arrested on charges of rape, sexual aggression, and assault. And basically, it's only happening now, but it's been going on since 1950. There's this Catholic school called Notre Dame de Bethlehem, a private Catholic school, which is partially financed by the state. There are 7,500 private schools in France, which are financed by the state. Everything is financed by the state, at least a little bit in France. And there was this report on February 5th by Mediapart, which is this good investigative journalism publication, that found that François Bayrou, the current prime minister, reportedly knew about these allegations going back to the 90s. Now, in 1996, there was a report of a child who was beat so badly by a priest that his eardrum ruptured, and his father sued the school. And that sort of made local news in the area, which is it's called Pyrénées-Atlantiques, the region. It's down south by Spain. It's where the mayor's from. He's the prime minister. He's the mayor of Pau, a city down there. And François Bayrou defended the school at that point, but he said he didn't know anything about these sexual assault allegations. It was a school known for disciplining bad kids. Some of his own kids went there. His wife was a teacher there. But it turned out there was also, a priest, Father Caracar in particular is one name that's come out. He was the director of the school, and in 1998, he was accused of raping at least 2 students there. And in between the accusations, he fled to the Vatican. And then when the second accusation came forward, he killed himself. He threw himself into the River Tiber. And
Classic suicide.
Classic, yeah. And to sort of wrap it all up, François Bayrou asked about that case and regarding Father Caracar. The judge in the case, on the record, has said, yeah, he came to my house and he asked me about it. A police officer who was investigating the case said that Bayrou had called someone in the prosecutor's office to ask about the dossier, and that delayed the initial presentation of this guy, Father Caracar, coming to court, which may have helped him get away at the time, because the judge, Christian Moran, has no idea why he wasn't kept in custody in between all these accusations. And on top of that all, when this all came out, he denied it. He's denied it consistently. 2023, a lot of lawsuits started being filed as victims came together and started talking. And he said, I had no idea about it. And one last thing, cherry on top of it, he was Minister of National Education at the time. He was president of the regional council. Beyond just his role as a personal citizen, he had you could say he had an obligation to investigate it.
And he visited the school 1 month after the first complaint, and his wife was at the funeral of the guy who killed himself.
So, Olly, obviously the linkage of the current prime minister to a child abuse factory is not great. How is the French public receiving this news, and what are the implications for the current government of France? Is this guy going to resign, or is he standing? Is he holding firm for now? What are his prospects?
He's holding firm for now, and it became a scandal because of Mediapart, but it sort of only really became a evolving scandal because one of the left-wing MPs challenged him on it and tried to get him basically to lie on record, or rather to potentially be seen to be lying on record because we're not entirely sure of everything. But it's like a rolling scandal now. It's like up to the minute new stories about this. Just before we came on, there was another story about his wife and whether or not she did or didn't know about it. And this is a pretty fragile government in terms of its setup. I couldn't tell you whether or not it will definitely lead to its collapse, but collapse is becoming more likely because of this scandal, I would say.
Well, I mean, this leads to my next question. That's like confusing to me as an outside observer. Why is this guy prime minister to begin with? Because, like, I mean, last I heard, didn't Melanchon essentially win the last election? And then Macron just appointed this guy prime minister? Could you just explain to me, like, how the election shook out and how this guy ended up being sort of a consensus pick for prime minister? Is that correct?
You've actually missed 1 p.m. In that sequence. But yeah, so I can start and then Marlon can pick up the thread. The EU elections last summer, Macron did not do very well. The far right were the only real force that had any kind of decent results. Macron was way down, just above the pick of the Socialist Party on like 13-14%, something like that. And so he dissolved the parliament, calling legislative parliamentary elections. This sort of forced the left together into an alliance called the New Popular Front. And between the kind of 2-round voting system, the left came out on top because just about enough centrists lent their votes to the left, though plenty didn't, in order to block the far right in the second round, and saw the left come first in the election. But the Fifth Republic is often called the presidential monarchy. And so the Sun King, Jupiter himself, basically has all the power, and he can decide whether or not to respect the results of a legislative election like that, because the left, although they won, didn't have a majority. And so he basically, and Marlon can pick up from here, but he, after sort of months of delay, because there was the Olympics, the satanic opening ceremony.
Asseyra, les aristocrates, on les pendra!
Like various excuses as to why he hadn't named a prime minister. Eventually, he happened upon Michel Barnier, who was not from the left. He wasn't from the far right. He was from a kind of pretty far right, but like the traditional Republican Party, which actually got 6% of the vote. So that's kind of the state of French democracy.
Yeah. Basically, like, the left came in first, but they didn't get a majority. The tradition is you appoint the party who gets the majority, who gets the most, deputies, and they get to form a government. But instead, they picked the party that got like 30 deputies because they were afraid that the National Rally was going to vote down the government if the left was put into power. Because the National Rally did really well. They came in third. They didn't win, but they came pretty close. And if a couple of percentage points had went differently, they could have conceivably got a majority. So they choose this guy, Michel Barnier, and he lasts for 3 months, but then the right brings him down because they don't think he's fascistic enough. The left brings him down because he was undemocratically, elected, and he's passing another austerity budget, slashing all the programs, getting rid of everything good about France, which has been a process happening for decades. And why is it Bayrou then? Because Bayrou is actually not as far right as Barnier, and he's known as a centrist. He's part of this party called like Union for Democracy, funny enough, because he didn't get his party got like 30 deputies in the election out of 577, his Union for Democracy, and now he's the prime minister. And apparently he threatened Macron. He said, we're going to stop voting for the government unless you appoint me prime minister. But who is he? So he's like this classic centrist guy. He's run for president over and over again. He sort of has this reputation for being a wannabe. He's like always wanted to be president. He still talks about running for president, even though he's getting older and older. We all mocked him on Flep24, when there was this news that he was going to want to be prime minister, because he never gets what he wants. He always gets given a position below what he wants. He's like nakedly ambitious, but kind of naively puerile. He owns this home called the White House because he thinks he's going to be president one day, but it's not the White House in French. It's called...
You can't be jockeying America if you're a French politician. The White House? Come on, man.
It's called the White House, not Le Maison Blanche. It's the White House. Anyway, so that's who he is. And the reason
has his own personal airline.
Sort of, yeah. Because also he has these 30 deputies, and Macron's been in such a precarious position where he can't get votes through. So he's been kind of influential, which is sort of how he got this position. But also there's this line from Paris Orly, which is in the south of Paris, to Pau, where he's the mayor, and he wants to be mayor and still be influential in the national parliament. So he needs a quick flight over. And this airline has been wildly unprofitable for years, and the company wants to shut it down. But every time the government tries to stop the subsidy to it, which is 3 million euros a year, Bayrou is I'm not going to vote. I'm going to bring down the budget. The budget. I need this airline to get into Paris, to get to the National Assembly. So he sort of has this influence over Macron. And when Macron ran for president in 2015, 2016, is that even true? Yeah, 2016, 2017. He was one of the first guys who supported him. So he's finally getting paid off, basically, for this support. He had if he ran, he would have probably got 6 or 7% of the vote, but he helped Macron get elected way back in 2017.
This really is scraping the bottom of the barrel of the centrists, though, at this point with Bayrou.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the Sun King, Macron, is still president, but how would you rate? I mean, it seems like a lot of sort of center-right parties in Europe and America are moribund at the moment. How would you rate Macron and his sort of centrist coalition? What are their prospects going forward, facing Marine Le Pen and her party on the far right, and Mélenchon and his party on the left? What are the contours of power in France right now?
Yeah, so there's 3 blocks basically. The what everyone in France, this term is being taken up across the spectrum. The idea of the bourgeois bloc, which is Macron's grouping. And it is basically being ground into dust slowly as he gets more and more unpopular by Le Pen on the right and Mélenchon on the left. And so what's kind of happening is increasingly what we're seeing is these alliances forming between Macron and the far right in order to provide the numerical majorities for Macron to govern. Sometimes they govern without majorities because there is, as I said, he's a presidential monarch. There's so much power in the hands of the president. He can overrule parliament on a semi-regular basis using this thing called Article 49.3, which is only meant to be used for budgets. But what they've been increasingly doing is just packaging parts of laws into budgets in order to pass them through decree if they need to. In terms of successors for Macron, there's Gabriel Attal, who is this young gay guy. He was one of there was 4 prime ministers last year. I think he was number 2 in the list of prime ministers. But him and Macron have had a falling out recently, partly because Macron and his friends kept using homophobic slurs around the Elysee. So I don't know if he will sort of get the mandate of heaven from Macron after this falling out.
He's fine. He doesn't have any self-respect, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple of other people that could maybe succeed Macron, but there aren't many people. It was such a sort of leader-centric project that there's going to be a recomposition after him, basically.
And as far as Marine Le Pen and the far right bloc it goes, what are the issues that they have latched onto that have seen them get very close to taking power in France? And just also a little background on who Marine Le Pen is. Is it immigration? Is that the usual fault line, or are there other issues that the far right bloc has sort of profited from?
I think it's basically immigration, cost of living, this type of stuff. And of course, they link the two. Marine Le Pen, the daughter of Jean-Marie Le Pen, who founded the National Front, the sort of far-right party, which is now, I would say, dominates. Pardon me?
I said RIP, sorry.
Oh, yeah, which dominates French political life. That's the thing. They've recuperated these ideas, the opposition to immigration, but I think these ideas are completely mainstream in French society. They've won ideologically. France is not some liberal paradise or left-wing paradise, even though it has this history. The mainstream discourse is 100% in lockstep with Marine Le Pen. The most popular cable news programs share her same ideas. There's even politicians who run much further to the right than her on all these issues, like this guy Eric Zemmour, who ran in the last presidential election. I talked to a lot of these National Rally politicians and LR politicians. That's the traditional mainstream right-wing party, Les Républicains, which has completely jumped to the right. And they call Marine Le Pen a socialist now, and they say she's weak and soft. And
Who's the young gun that I see coming up on the French right wing? He's like this baby-faced kid who loves eating gummy bears, and he's from like a rough neighborhood in Paris, but like he's literally only ever had jobs in politics.
Jordan Bardella, and he used to be a big COD player too. Like you can go and find his VOD. He posted VODs.
Well, between Haribo gummy bears and Call of Duty, I think he's got some appeal here.
He has got some appeal. He's like a complete Ken doll marketing creation. But, they got him because he's like non-threatening and he appeals to like young people. He's huge on TikTok, and he'll probably take over the party if she gets judged ineligible, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But there's like this corruption case against her, and she might be judged ineligible for the next election. So he'd probably take over as the candidate.
So in light of what you said about that, like the far right and Le Pen's party, based on like cost of living and certainly being anti-immigrant, they have sort of captured the public mood and have sort of won in shifting or just reflecting the opinions of the French public. Now, on the other side, on the left here, I noticed that right as America is getting ready to get rid of our birthright citizenship, being one of the only things that makes our country unique, I saw the other day Melanchon announcing that if you're born in France, you should be a French citizen. How does a left-wing party like Mélenchon's deal with this like enormous tide of anti-immigrant fervor, going even so far as to declare or propose birthright citizenship for France?
I guess very carefully. I don't know. Like they're not. That's the thing about the left in France. Like the left in France is great. I like Mélenchon a lot, but the reality is they're not. I don't think they are a majority of the country anymore of their views. The way Melanchon would probably describe it and their political strategy is there's this word, well, just in English too, you conflictualize everything. You never, so of course, like the Socialist Party, the traditional left who was last elected under François Hollande, they would say, yeah, there's valid concerns about immigration. We need to adopt some of the program of the National Rally. But Mélenchon and LFI's, which is the Front Insoumise, his party's theory is just the opposite. We have to conflictualize everything. Politics is not just a process of like marketing an image, but a process of both creating an electorate and activating an electorate. You educate an electorate. You educate yourself. Politics is a project of self-emancipation. We don't have to accept, the conventional wisdom. We can try to change conventional wisdom. Mélenchon is a great speaker. You probably saw that, like the thing about birthright citizenship. I was at a speech of his in Paris at the POI headquarters, which is this old Trotskyist party he used to be a member of, but is still kind of close to. And he talked for 2 hours with no notes. He's a great speaker and he convinces people. And when he debates, he convinces people. So his theory would be we need a campaign. He wants an early presidential election. There's all these rumors that Macron may step down because it doesn't have a majority. I think those have kind of died down after he named Bayrou, and Bayrou survived a bunch of no confidence votes because the National Rally didn't vote against him. But there's this constant like mood of campaigning. We're always ready for the next campaign, and we can both activate an electorate that doesn't vote and create an electorate through, the challenge of politics, which is education in a sense.
That's incredibly interesting because, I'm loath to repeat a very popular genre of article during the first 2 Trump years, but it is a little bit of the Bernie 2020 strategy, but also more like a Trump 1 thing. People kind of forget with Trump 1 that a lot of his signature policies that are still signature policies of his were like 60-40, 70-30 not in his favor by the time he became like a national political figure. And not really his theory, but like some of the Peter Thiel affiliates before Thiel got more involved with him, and Bannon especially, their theory was just that like you don't need this to be overwhelmingly popular when you roll it out, because you can create an electorate that isn't represented in the data we have, because people kind of don't account for how non-exhaustive the data on individual policy polling is, especially in America. But also that like even if you only achieve realistically like you go from like 70-30 to like 55-45, 60-40, you've still done enough, and there's like enough polarization that math kind of will work out for you.
Yeah, voters are weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically the idea that they have at the moment is this thing called the fourth block theory, which is like the 3 blocks exist represented in parliament, and that there is out in the country a fourth block of abstentionists. And there's lots of data to show that the sociological profile of an abstentionist is much closer to the sociological profile of a left voter than it is to the voters of the other blocks. And they're kind of banking on being able to activate enough of them. And the other thing that they're going to try and do is, because their sort of initial theory of change was like several quick leaps to power, run these presidential campaigns in which Melanchon is like hologramming himself around, generate a massive surge of enthusiasm in those campaigns. But I think they've kind of realized now that they're getting close, but not close enough. So they're trying to entrench a bit and rebuild like what used to be the kind of infrastructure of the old Communist Party. So they're going to run a bunch of local mayoral elections and try and sweep up those next year to try and sort of like root themselves in the country.
That's incredibly interesting because the sort of theory of activating the non-voter under the premise that like an abstentionist and a non-voter is oftentimes like to the left on most issues that they can coherently articulate compared to the rest of the electorate. Like that again, that was the theory of Bernie 2020. But in places where it's failed, a lot of the reason that people think it's failed is because, well, in order to like achieve like a critical mass of people like that, you would have to, be collecting data and organizing in a way for, 5 to 10 years before that.
Yeah, you can't just parachute in.
Right. But what's interesting is with like the Bernie people, especially, even though Bernie got his start in municipal politics, that was never part of this program. But that's incredibly interesting. I mean, like obviously municipal and mayoral politics are different in France and in America, but it's a pretty good way of like getting a bunch of people on file and figuring out their voting behavior.
Yeah. And I'll grind my axe a little here. Like I always think what like separates Mélenchon from people like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn is, and I always say this line like, left populism was never tried actually, until Jean-Luc Mélenchon, because there's this electorate that exists and it's like a conspiratorial electorate. It's like, and I don't say that like pejoratively, it's like a conspiratorial electorate, anti-system electorate, which I think a guy like Mélenchon tapped in a lot better to than people like Bernie Sanders. I remember like, ahead of the 2017 election, there was like some terrorist attacks, and Mélenchon, like in an interview, was like, it's funny how there's always these attacks like right before the election, you know what I mean? And then everyone jumped down his throat, but he didn't back down on it. You never see that from someone like Bernie Sanders.
He's also never condemned Hamas either.
Yeah, I like everything I read from him. It is like my greatest fantasy of what like someone in the electoral left would behave like. Yeah, no, I mean, Bernie did have like a lot of outsider credibility, which just kind of shows how completely fucking obedient everyone in Democratic politics is. That just his 2016 campaign of like, I don't think the most unpopular woman in America will necessarily be a good candidate was seen as like the craziest, most anti-establishment thing anyone had ever fucking done.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's unbowed. That's how they call it that.
And Felix, to your point about your fondest fantasies, Marlon, I want to come back to something you said about what a good public speaker Mélenchon is, because I remember it was about a year ago where I saw a footage of a speech he was giving to a rally of supporters. And like in translation, this is the speech where he talked about nationalizing time, which sounds like sort of a goofy concept, but really what he was saying is like he articulated something that like I feel very deeply, and it was the first time I had ever seen any politician of note make this point. But essentially what he was saying is that freedom is the hours of the day that you have to yourself off the clock, like away from producing for the market. And part of that freedom is that those hours are yours to do with what you please, including doing nothing, which is a legitimate choice. Could you talk a little bit more about like that aspect of Mélenchon's message?
Yeah, there were 2 times he gave that speech. The one I think that like there's a translated video of, I was not there, but he gave that speech another time in Toulouse during his presidential campaign in 2022. And I was there. It was like this. Toulouse in the spring is supposed to be hot, but it snowed and it was like windy and it was this weird like sort of magical energy there. And I talked to like this woman afterwards, and everyone latched onto that moment where he talked about nationalizing time. And she said he's a poet. And like, it's true. He is very poetic. He's literary, but he doesn't come off as pretentious at the same time. He's think really that funny. He's very funny. Exactly.
The TikTok of Charizard dancing on his desk where he says, "Go back to Macron." I love that.
Yeah, but he's like, he'll often riff up there. Felix.
That's what Donnie Deals can do. That is an ability that Donald Trump has that almost no other politician has. The ability to riff off the cuff.
Yeah. He doesn't give speeches. He sometimes has a few notes like on the back of a piece of paper, but like it's hard to explain the oratory because he like alternates between this sort of poetic, soft energy, but he's also the most contentious, like vituperative, aggressive politician at the same time, which is another part of his appeal. He'll be on television. He'll be shouting in the face of the scumbag journalist representing with his finger pointed straight at him, this sort of like Mediterranean aggression that he has in him. So I think it's like that. Those two elements make him so great. He used to be a school teacher. He was like minister of professional teaching in the Mitterrand government. He's very educated, well-read. He's written like 12 books, but he's a fighter.
Training.
Enseignement professionnel. Yeah, I think that's a better translation. Yeah.
I just like for all these reasons, when I read about Melanchon, I wish there was like a transfer portal system for political parties like we have in college athletics here in America. So it's like if his party doesn't win the next election in France, I think America should be able to claim him on waivers or maybe do a trade with like, we'll give you some of our top prospects for Melanchon and his political party. I mean, look, picks. I got Shinedown number one on my draft board right now, but let's be honest, she's got its country to run right now. So I'm just saying, like, if you lose the election, I think you should enter the transfer portal. And I would really love it if America could just like get Melanchon on our side.
Yeah. I mean, like you guys may not want to do this, but keep in mind, how many Ruben Gallegos do you have right now?
Can I interest you in a Pete Buttigieg?
One Ruben Gallego would infinitely increase the amount that you have in the French Senate. He would go right to the Senate.
Listen, people on the streets are just whispering to each other about Ruben Gallego's brave statements in Paris.
Mélenchon has a whole bit in his book about like sugar and why fast food is bad. So not to do the European typical anti-American, but I don't know if he'd go off so hot there.
Well, he'll need some political re-education before becoming an American political party. I mean, he will have to adopt, unfortunately, a burger equals good party line. But, we have to be pragmatic is what I'm saying here.
I'll say this. If you want draft picks, there's a couple of rookies in LFE that you'll hear it here first. There's a guy named David Giraud. He's like a deputy. He's in the National Assembly for Roubaix. He's running for municipal election. He's a great guy. He's great. You look him up. There's like someone did some translated stuff of him. He has some great quotes calling like this pro-Israel guy a pig in the National Assembly and everything. So there's a rookie you should pick up. He's my favorite, David Giraud. I just wanted to boost him real quick if we're talking about draft picks. Go ahead, Ollie.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, this is also, I guess, a draft pick, is in terms of like conflictuality and just like the leadership of sticking to your principles, because I think that's probably like one of the main things that lots of the other left movements have lacked. I spoke to some people in La France Insoumise during the election campaign last summer, and they were like a little bit worried about something that Mélenchon had done, which was, this was like off the record. They were just like, we're not sure this was a good idea, which was in a really right-wing seat in Vaucluse in Avignon. He ran this guy, Raphael Arnaud. And Raphael Arnaud is like not a typical politician at all. When I've met him twice, both times he was wearing like Stone Island, dressed like a football casual. He's tatted up. He's got earrings, and he led an Antifa movement that has been condemned supposedly for violence. But, there is like a lot of lawfare in the French legal system. And he was this thing, fiché S, which is like terrorism suspect. It means nothing. There are school children who have the label because the French state does engage in a lot of lawfare against trade unionists and left activists and pro-Palestine activists and all of this. There's a kind of whole like lobbying and legal apparatus for repressing that stuff. So I don't think he is a terrorist, but it was like such a sort of political hot potato to invest this guy as your candidate in a right-wing seat. But their kind of social movement guys have been like doing the sort of data and stuff and think, I think we can win this. And they did. And so they now have this Antifa leader in the National Assembly. He dresses like Robespierre, and it's just like very, very different.
Well, I mean, like, it sort of returns to like, if any lessons that American political parties or movements can take from, of left wing political movements elsewhere in the world. Or just politics in general, in the moment the world finds itself in, is number one, be smart, but also be rude and aggressive, and then also like stick to your principles and fuck polling. Like if you believe something to be true or right, then stand on that and fuck what the opinion polls say. Like a belief that you can change the public rather than just simply accede to their whims.
And also leave the party.
Yeah, leave the party. Leave the party.
Leave the party, but also something that is just ignored across the board. Voters can tell when you're condescending to them, even if you don't think you are. That is a huge reason, I think, behind like Melanchon's oratory success is he's not talking down to people, and again, that was kind of a Bernie thing too. But yeah, it just, we brought up Ruben Gallego. He's been on our minds because he went out there and said, if you vote for Democrats, we're going to get you a big ass truck and you're going to get rich at your job. And it's like, again, like voters aren't fucking geniuses, but they can tell when you are talking down to them.
Also, no one has ever gotten rich from a job. All right. Well, we're before we run out of time here, obviously French politics does not get much notice here in America. But I do have to mention one thing that has crossed over into this country and our insane right wing. And I'm speaking, of course, about the new documentary by Candace Owens, a video titled "Becoming Brigitte: An Introduction." Headline here: Why false rumors about Brigitte Macron being transgender are resurfacing. So I guess I should ask you, the experts, is Emmanuel Macron's wife, Brigitte, trans?
I can't say definitively, but I don't think so. All I can say is I don't think so. I didn't know a lot about this story. You guys mentioned bringing it up, but then I went yesterday and did a bunch of research.
Has this been a thing that has been did this start in France, or is this something that's been totally imported from America?
It started in France, around 2021. These two sort of vloggers, Amandine Roy and Natasha Ray, came out with this theory. The theory went further back, and the theory was that, first of all, the theory was that Brigitte Macron was born to this family, the Trogneau family in Amiens, which is where Macron grew up, and they grew up, and the young Brigitte died, and her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneau, took over her identity, but then also
as
her
one
brother...
does, usually when, a sibling dies, you just become them.
Just to make mother happy, pretended to be her. I don't know exactly. But, and then he became transgender.
The mom has the same AI as a guard in a stealth game. Didn't I used to have two kids? Probably.
Exactly. Yeah. And then met Macron. And of course, the seed of all this is that the origin of Brigitte and Emmanuel's relationship is really strange and very disturbing. He was they say at first they said he was 16, but then it came out that he was definitely 15 based on the timeline. She was 39. She was his drama teacher. But some people, I think the Candace Owens and them are going with the idea that he was 14, which could be true. It's a little murky when he actually met her. He performed in a Milan Kundera play that she directed. He was big into the theater, Macron, back in the day. He was a sensitive young man. But back to the theory. So it's always all based on, they say there's no pictures of Brigitte Macron under the age of 40. They say you can't find her birth certificate. They say you can't find any pictures of her pregnant with any of her 3 children. Now, I talked, because again, I didn't know a lot about it, so I found this journalist called Jonathan Modab. He wrote for this magazine called Valeurs Actuelles, which is this reactionary right-wing magazine, very anti-Macron. But he looked into this theory in 2022 when it was circulating, and he wanted to write an article about it for Valeurs Actuelles, but they didn't want to even be associated with it, the theory. But what he found was he found her birth certificate. He found the marriage certificate of her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneau, and she was the witness, officially. he found the death certificate of her first husband, because that was part of the theory too, that her first husband had never existed, the husband that supposedly gave her the kids, and Macron cucked, I guess, Andre Ozier. But he found his death certificate, and then he like went to Amiens, and he like had a picture of Jean-Michel Trogneux, which he found because Jean-Michel Trogneux is seen in footage of Macron's inauguration. He's clearly there. And he asked around, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's Jean-Michel, this guy." And he went to his house and knocked on his door, and Jean-Michel opened the door, and because he said he was like expecting a package, so he let the guy right in. But then he told him who he was, and he kicked him out. So it's kind of like, it's like transparently not true, the whole theory, and it's so like comprehensively not true. But sort of the origins of it are kind of interesting, because it comes from this magazine called Faits et Documents, which was published by this guy called Emmanuel Ratier until he died recently, I think 2016, 2017. And Faits et Documents is like known for being this far right magazine that like has some interesting stuff in it. They like have really good archives and documents into people, but it always comes with like this sort of fascistic sense of disinformation. There's always like real information and fake information in there. Like they did one on Jean-Luc Brunel, who was Epstein's procurer, and there was some like interesting information. I've looked a lot into that case that I had never heard of, but then also they claimed he changed his name from Ben Shamoul, which isn't which is a Jewish name. And like I looked into it. Right. They have like this dictionary that have name changes that the government used to publish, and it's a different guy. He has a different middle name. It's not the same guy. So that's where it comes from. Candace Owens is interviewing this guy named Xavier Poussard, who is was the publisher of Faits et Documents. And I heard, and I'm going to wrap up on this because I know we're running out of time, but I talked about this story about 10 months ago with a couple of like investigative journalists in France. And one of them said that they had been, and this is like a really good journalist who has great sources, has written excellent stuff, and has some sources in the intelligence community and stuff. And they told me that these intelligence sources were trying to feed him this story, and they confused. He was like, "Well, it's clearly not true. Why are they doing this?" And this is sort of getting to speculation, but their theory is that Macron and Brigitte kind of want this story out there, in the sense that it gets you not looking into Macron and Brigitte's past, because Brigitte Macron's really influential. She's very powerful. Like she's a big reason for why Macron became president. She had all these links in like French conservative networks that helped him come up, etc. But then if you start talking about that now, you're just Candace Owens, Xavier Poussard, Brigitte Macron's transgender. That's who you are if you look into that now. So that was sort of their theory, that this is where it comes from.
I guess my question with this is like, I saw Candace Owens talking to someone on Twitter the other day, and they were essentially asking like, let's say this could be proven beyond any shred of doubt. Like, what are the implications? And also, who cares? And then someone responded to them saying, you don't get it. She's going to take down the entire liberal global order when this becomes made known. And I'm just sort of like, it just, to me, it's an example of how degraded conspiracy theories have gotten. Because it used to be you had to tell like an interesting story that at least made sense. Whereas with this, they're just sort of like, Macron's wife is trans. After that, the world is ours. And I don't know what the ask is here or what the implication, other than to what they just to discredit Macron in some way.
This has been kind of like a long running thing throughout the Macron presidency. Like there were all of these Gilets jaunes memes back when that was happening about how gay he was. And I never really, I could never work out what the, like, I mean, that's another whole theory in itself that she's his beard. Like, which is a thing that gets aired as well. But you'd
have a shorter distance to go to prove that than that she's actually her dead brother.
Yeah. But yeah, like this has been like kind of a long running thing, like speculating about Macron and his sexuality and his wife and everything, because it is a really weird relationship. My own theory is that if you read the Macron biographies, he was like really, really close to his grandma, who was a teacher. And he had this sort of like bizarre relationship with her where he like, in all of the sort of things that he's written, he talks way more about her than about his parents, sort of never really credits them with any intellectual influence or anything, but always talks about his grandma. And I think it's just some kind of like weird Freudian thing where since like he talks about how her death was like the worst sort of thing of his life. And I kind of think maybe he's just replaced his grandma.
God, he's one of those guys.
I'm a grandparent orphan.
Yeah, it may be different in France, but we have this major problem in America where people are like, the worst day of my life when my grandmother died when she was 87 and I was 53. It's all been dark since then.
Yeah, he is one of those guys.
Oh, God, yeah.
Get him out of there. Get
this
him
is
out.
like genuinely, supposedly one of the reasons that he ran against Hollande and like broke off from the Parti Socialiste was that Hollande didn't show him enough, sort of didn't take his feelings into consideration enough when his grandma died. So
He was economy minister under Hollande.
Oh, that's really splendid. All right, we'll wrap it up. We'll leave it there for today. I want to thank Olly and Marlon from the Flep24 French Legislative Elections podcast for coming on the show and just shine a little light for our dullard burger audience about what's going on in France, a nice civilized nation that's merely 1% less racist than this country, or 1% more, depending on how you look at it or who's.
if you look at the cartoons.
Depending on the weather.
Yeah. All right. Olly, Marlon, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Listen to Flep24, the French Legislative Assembly podcast for 2025.